Hello, everyone. It's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So, guys, I have with me tonight the awesome Ron Placone. Let me make sure I'm up first. I'm not seeing myself live, even though I should be live by now. Everything is telling me that I'm live. All right, so I'm going to take it with a grain of salt that I am live. Give me 1 second, Ron. I just want to make sure that I'm up.
All right.
There we are. Okay, so yeah. So Ron, please tell everyone hi. I mean, Ron is, and by the way, I'm sorry, I got messed up on that. Ron is from Jimmy Dore show. He's also has his own show. What is the name of that? There's another one
Get your
called
news on with Ron.
Right, that's it. That was the one I was looking at earlier today. I love that. The news with Ron. And five chords of truth. So Ron, please tell the audience hello.
Hi everybody. Good to see y'all.
So we were talking when this started. We were having this conversation about censorship. We kind of jumped in and then, realized it was like, oh, right, we're here to do a show. We're not necessarily here to just talk about censorship. I was explaining to Ron what took place with my channel. It's saying how the thing was shut down, and I was kind of making this point about Alex Jones. Ron, go ahead. I'm gonna let you finish that particular point about Alex Jones because I think you're absolutely right.
Well, we were just saying, and Alex Jones was just the for instance that came up because I know he's been facing some slack. But we were saying, you have to recognize when the powerful are trying to just overly censor voices, and you have to recognize that that's a bad thing, even when they're voices you don't agree with. I strongly disagree with Alex Jones. I don't appreciate what he does. But if he were to be banned from YouTube or something like that, I'd be against that happening because that's a certain danger. And the danger that poses that the intelligence agencies are going to determine what is and isn't free speech, that Silicon Valley is going to determine what is and isn't free speech. That's way more dangerous than anything Alex Jones could say, or anyone like that. Again, he's just the for instance in this case. So, a lot of the stuff that's been happening that we've also been talking about has been very alarming. You went through something on YouTube. Tim Black's going through something on YouTube right now. I guess Alex Jones went through something. I had a weird, for instance, myself, where I was randomly demonetized for a while. Then it was just randomly back and no explanation. So there's some bizarre stuff going on. And
it's so weird.
It's a dangerous cyclical effect. And then you can go into what RT's been going through and other, other foreign bureaus here in the United States that are American bureaus. And, that's a common thing. There's news bureaus all over the world. We have an American news bureau in Russia, for instance. There's BBC America. There's Al Jazeera America. And now a lot of these bureaus, some more than others, are under attack because of this new Red Scare. And, the whole Russiagate has really gotten out of hand, and it has been abused by people in the corporate media, by people in the Democratic establishment, and just the establishment in general, kind of as a distraction and as a power grab. And, even if you do think they're going to catch Trump on something, which I don't know how much time they need. It's been a year and a half. We've seen nothing other than 13 Twitter trolls. I don't know how much time you need. But even if you do think that, how you can just be so blind to the cyclical effects of all this and how you can't see the difference between an investigation and McCarthyism, which we crossed that line a long time ago, how you can't see the difference is beyond me. And it's dangerous.
It is dangerous. And I always make this argument that that you had a lot of people who lost that night, meaning when Hillary Clinton lost that election, you had a lot of people who didn't understand how she could lose. In their mind, it's like, oh my God, Huffington Post said she was going to win by 98% to 2%. How on earth could this woman lose this election? She lost a reality show host. And so in their mind, there's no way for her to lose. She's a perfectly nice person. She's awesome. I don't understand why she lose, how she could lose to this guy. So for them, I think they pin this in as, well, they had to be something else. There had to be something nefarious for the reason why she lost the election, as opposed to her just being a miserable, horrible candidate. They don't want to own up to that. They don't want to own it. Oh, and by the way, and you're right, that is dangerous. One of the Caitlin Johnston, one of the guys, when they went after alt-rights on I think it was medium.com, the guy comes in, I think it's from Mother Jones. Mother Jones is spinning in her grave right now. and makes this point of, yeah, you also need to go after some of these other people like Caitlin Johnston. Now, whatever you want to say about Katie, she is not, there's a far difference between some of the alt-right trolls versus something that Johnston would say. It's fucking amazing. But yeah,
no,
I guess
I'm actually a fan. I'm actually a fan of her. So
yeah, love her. Absolutely
I
love her.
like, and even when, I mean, I'm sure I'm sure there's been some moments where we might not see 100% eye to eye, but I totally respect her point of view. And more importantly, I love her writing. I think her style is freaking awesome. She makes me laugh every single article. And she lines up her bullet points perfectly. She's a fantastic journalist. And, I'd rather have somebody that maybe I'm not going to agree with 100% of what they say. And I can't even think of a particular, for instance, where I've disagreed with Caitlin. I'm just talking more big picture here. I'd rather have someone where it's like, I respect their work. Their work compels me into deeper thinking. And maybe every now and again, I'm like, well, I kind of disagree with that point. Than somebody who just offers nothing unique or any type of, perspective that changes from the status quo whatsoever. And that's part of the reason Caitlin Johnston is part of my media diet and will continue to be.
Same
and other voices, even some that identify as progressive voices, are not.
Yeah. I like her writing. She has this punchy style of writing that gets the point across.
She's very funny, and she's got a great way with prose. I wanted to collaborate with her on a piece, but unfortunately she was too busy. But yeah, I love Caitlin. She's great.
She's cool, people. You're just so we're clear, because I'm pretty sure you've been hit with this before. You're not a Russian bot or anything. Like you're not you're not some Russian troll. You're not being paid by Putin.
Please move on to the next question. Move on to the next question.
Fair enough.
Yeah. No, I'm not. But I am a regular. I don't want to answer that,
buddy. I don't want to answer that one. Let's move on.
I am a regular on RT. I am a regular on Crosstalk with Peter Lavelle, which I love being a regular on that show. I have a lot of respect for Peter. Peter and I don't agree on everything politically, but we have really constructive conversations, as well as the other panelists, on kind of what's going on in the contemporary United States. I'm honored to be a part of that show once a month, and I think a lot of the flack RT is getting is beyond ridiculous. All of it's beyond ridiculous. Yeah.
I mean, it's way
on that network. Larry King's on that network, for crying out loud. Like what? Larry King's a Russian spy? Like, come on. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, Tom Hartman's also a Russian spy.
Tom Hartman, Jesse Ventura, Lee Camp. They're all Russian spies, apparently.
Navy SEAL Jesse Ventura. Nobody knew that he was working for Russia while he was out there killing people abroad or on the set of Terminator. Not Terminator. What was that show? Predator. He was on Predator. So yeah, that's amazing. So I'm curious. Have you been getting some flack from that? Like, I would imagine it's one thing you're talking to, another lefty who don't necessarily buy into the Russian nonsense. But have you been getting hit with people who do buy into the Russian nonsense? And I would imagine that can be a pain in the ass having to deal with maniacs.
Well, I mean, I'm sure we all take some of that. I think right now, and this is actually something, I think Joe Rogan kind of hinted at this when he was doing the interview with Jimmy, is that people are kind of very hyper tribal right now. And I think for some people that means they're really staying in their lane, and that's the Democratic establishment lane. And so if you criticize the system as a whole, and you criticize what's going on, say like in the Chuck Schumer end of things, well then clearly you must be a Trump sympathizer. And this type of A and B dichotomy is, first of all, very limited. And very shallow. And so I think there's the same thing with Russiagate, where you just have these people that can't think beyond the A and B dichotomy. So it's like, well, if you're not with us, you're with the terrorists. And they don't know what to make of somebody. I've been called a Trump sympathizer. I've been called alt-right before, because of criticizing the Democratic establishment and because of Russiagate. The most ironic thing about all this is I have called Trump a liar and a fraud to the face of some of his biggest supporters on international television. That's something I've done and will continue to do. So no, I'm not a Trump sympathizer. I'm about as far from it as you can get. But to people that kind of can't see beyond that A and B dichotomy, they don't know what to make of folks like me or folks like you or folks like Tim Black or Lee Camp or the Jimmy Dore Show or Sane Progressive, or, you know, the list goes on and on. They don't know what to make of those voices, because the truth is, for some people, that's really what they are. I mean, for some people, you know, I used to think, and this is getting like broader here, but I used to think that, you know, and this is going back to when I was like 18, 19 years old. I've always been a pretty progressive person. I've always favored the idea of single payer as long as I understood what it was, you know, and I was taught about it freshman year of college, whatever. I've been for it since then. I used to always think I'm a pretty left-leaning person. Neither political party in this country really speaks for me, but the Democratic Party is the clearest glass, and it is the most likely to win scenario for me.
Same.
Now I feel like it's broken more than I realized. I used to think that we all want the same things. We just have a different idea on how to get there. And it's more of a strategy question. I think to some extent that's still the truth, but I think when it comes to the true power structure, that's not the case. I was wrong. I don't think the Democratic establishment wants single payer healthcare. I don't think they want free college. I don't think they want living wages. And a lot of, you know, Democratic elites, they subscribe to that too. They're not progressive. They're actually right wing. They're conservatives. That's why I like to call them either corporate apologists or Starbucks conservatives. I try to avoid, like, even using the term neoliberal, I try to avoid it to an extent, even though it's accurate. They are neoliberals, because that's what neoliberalism means. Neoliberalism refers to the liberalizations of markets, which means you're in favor of just letting corporations run rampant. But in our contemporary society, we associate liberal with something left. So the term neoliberalism to the general person can sometimes be misleading. So I like to straight up say conservative. Like, I like to say, it's like, no, you're not even liberal. You're a conservative. You know, you're a liberal. You're a liberal in the Phil Oak sense, but not a lot of people have heard that song, or not enough people. You know, you and I have, but a lot of general people have not. So they need to know, like, these are conservatives. These are not lefties. These are not progressives. These are people that have a gay friend and want to protect their tax bracket, and that's it. And they're not part of the left. They're not homophobic, and that's great. Homophobia is terrible, and we still have a long way to go in evolving on that. Totally, not trying to marginalize that issue, but there needs to be a little bit more than just a couple social issues, which, by the way, the Democrats aren't even. I mean, Nancy Pelosi just endorsed a pro-life candidate. Like, the few things. The few things separating Republicans and Democrats are cool with gay people and abortion. Even that's going away. Yeah, even that is going away. So, you know,
I guess I agree with you on this. It's funny how our political awakening is somewhat similar. Our political arc. I felt the same way. I voted for Ralph Nader in one of the other elections. So even when I wasn't politically aware, I was aware enough to say, I like this guy. I don't like these other two people. And I felt the same way. It was this thing of, I don't think these guys are really in it for the things that I want. So it's like, I don't have this belief. There was a video that I put up today with Keith Ellison explaining how, well, lefties, progressives need to support blue dog Democrats, essentially Dinos. They need to support blue dog Democrats because otherwise a Republican will get in office. As if the only reason that you vote somebody is to keep somebody else out of office.
Right.
That's insanity. Like, and he's like, Nancy Pelosi really does believe in single payer healthcare. She just can't say that.
She does not.
Yeah, she just can't say it. It's like, what? Then why do I care? It's like, why do I care whether, you know, she believes it or not if she can't necessarily say it and advocate for it? I agree with you, man. I felt the same way. When I hit that moment of saying, oh, yeah, it's not that we have a different approach. We just don't believe in the same things.
Yeah, we straight up don't. And you know, and I learned that literally on air, like on some different shows that I used to be on, but I'm no longer on. But it's one of those things where, you know, I mean, you mentioned Nader. I voted for Kerry in 2004, but it's not like I was really voting for Kerry. I was voting against Bush.
Yeah.
Because I saw how awful Bush was. I saw how dangerous he was. And it's one of those things in our political structure. There's a time for incrementalism and a time for a sharp turn. Yeah. This is a time for a sharp turn. And, you know, why do I say that? Well, in the anatomy of a revolution, a status quo needs to shift when you reach a point of crisis. if we're not in a point of crisis, I don't know what a point of crisis looks like. Donald Trump is president of the United States. There is a rich and poor gap that arguably has not been seen since ancient Egypt. That's how far back we need to go. Half the country's poor. College student loan debt is absolutely out of control. We have thousands of people just in California alone dying a year without health care. Oh, and why don't we have single payer in the state of California? Because of a Democrat. Not a Republican, because of a Democrat. So we really have one party right now. It's the money party. And it's reached a point of absolute crisis. I mean, you're to call back to something you brought up earlier, the whole Hillary Clinton, the election of 2016. In September, I was sitting with members of my family and I said, get ready for President Trump. And everybody looked at me like I was insane. 2 months later, look what happened. When you give people nothing to vote for and only something to vote against, you're going to lose 100% of the time. That's just how it works, especially in a time where people are hurting so bad. Hillary Clinton gave people nothing to vote for. She gave people something to vote against. And, and I've had this conversation with people who, on the other 95% of things, we see eye to eye and we respect each other as colleagues. But when it comes to what happened with Clinton, people would just be like, oh, well, progressives didn't give her a fair chance. And how I respond to that is I'm just like, name one policy of hers you were excited about. Name one policy. And they'll bring up something like, well, minimum wage, like she was against living wages. Okay, let's try again. Well, the environment, do you think she was pro fracking? Yeah, she promoted it all around the world, and Obama opened it up to drilling too, so she certainly would have. Oh, well, net neutrality. Do you think the worst media policy legislation ever in the history of our lives was passed under her husband? So, yes, I do think we would allot net neutrality with Hillary Clinton. The only difference is we would have to listen to her supporters telling us how it wasn't a big deal.
Pretty much.
At least because Trump's in office, we have some unlikely allies in the net neutrality fight. Chuck Schumer himself retweeted a Jimmy Dore show video about net neutrality. The beautiful irony in that is in that video, I said, hey, when it comes to net neutrality, we have a lot of unlikely allies in this fight. Folks we disagree with the other 364 days a year. We're on the same team with this particular issue. And Chuck Schumer retweeted.
And here's the retweet.
Yeah. He proved my point.
I think they're way wrong on this one with the Clinton thing. I keep making this point. This is not like in the 40s and the 50s where you had all of these other movements pushing against the party. You had socialists, you had communists, you had all of these other groups that were pushing and pulling on the Democratic Party to get it to change into something else. I mean, even when you got to Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt, Republican, even when you got to him and this trust buster thing, there's this quote where he's making this argument of, we need to get this straight because the public itself is going to come and get us at some point if things get too bad. At the very least, you had something pushing against it. You have nothing pushing against the Democratic Party now, with the exception of losing. Like the reason why they decided to have a unity commission was because they lost 15 million people at the party. The reason why, Joe Manchin came on TYT begging for support, or the reason why, all of these people trying to make themselves in progressives, they are scared they're going to lose. The only pressure that's pushing against them right now is the point that they could potentially lose. The people who are saying, well, you should have just voted for Clinton, completely missed that point. They go with this idea that you're going to somehow get something magically different by completely going along with status quo. Like if I'm just giving my vote away perfunctory, then that somehow magically in the future you're going to get something fundamentally different.
I'm with you. And the other thing too is, like, statistically, it's not progressives' fault that she lost. It's the fault of, first of all, the DNC, and it's the fault of them having no message. They didn't give people anything to be excited about. Trump fed them some snake oil. It was a lie. All of his promises were lies, and we're seeing that, being proven day in and day out. But nonetheless, they were there, whereas she offered nothing. She ran the most personal campaign ever in recent history. There was a Harvard study that conducted, they analyzed all of her commercials, and it was all just personal attacks on Trump. So really, she didn't have anything in terms of, this is what I'm offering you. What she was offering was, I'm not that. Trump's despicable, and I'm not Trump. And that's just not enough. So it's the Democratic strategy that has given us Trump. It's not progressives. Most progressives held their nose and voted for her. They were pissed off that they were in that situation, but they didn't. I'm not one of them. I didn't do that. Yeah, I voted for Stein too, and I would do the same thing tomorrow. But I mean, just this whole thing. It's I think that progressives are needed to move forward at this point, because what Bernie Sanders did was he slapped us all in the face and said, "Hey, there's more of you than you realize."
Yeah.
In 2008, when I was supporting Dennis Kucinich in the primary and was totally stoked about him, not enough people were quite there yet. People thought Obama was the guy, and I was thrilled when Obama won. I went on to vote for him twice. But there was a little bit of, a lot of my friends were like hugging me and stuff in '08, and they were like, "I know this means everything to you." And I'm like, I'm happy because Bush was just president for 8 years, but this guy's a moderate. I mean, it's better than what we had, sure. And I think he's going to do some good things. He ended up disappointing me, but even more than I expected. I was happy he won, but I'm like, well, this wasn't the guy I was for in the primary. But it was because I realized that the country wasn't there yet, Well, Bernie Sanders indicated to me that, yeah, the country is there now. There's more progressives, and there's a lot of people where they're going to be turned on to these issues if we just kind of tweak the messaging a little bit. Everybody just wants to be able to go to a doctor when they're sick. They want to be able to have educational opportunities. They want to be compensated fairly for the work that they do. And there's all kinds of really cool approaches to communicating this message to Heartland America that sees the left as just a bunch of limousine liberals thumbing their nose at them. That's not what the left is. The left is really evolving, and we're looking more. We resemble more of the like heavy union left of the of the 40s and 50s and so forth. That's what we're turning into, and that's a good thing. We're still really passionate about social issues; those are still really important. And it's just as important, but you know what? We're for all the above, and we see the connections. We see the connections between living wages and the environment and DAPL and Black Lives Matter. We see all those connections, and we see how the power structure rot that's going on in this country is really connected to everything else as well.
Yeah, those things aren't separate at all. Oftentimes, the party tries to make them like separate and distinct from one another. Like, it's like we're supporting identity. Well, the only reason they're supporting identity because they don't want to deal with their donors. It's well, if I actually have to support healthcare, if I have actually support college for everyone, well, then I have to deal with my donors. I can't get the money, or they're not going to give me all of this cash if I turn around and say we're going to make sure people have drugs when they need drugs, or healthcare benefits when they need healthcare benefits. They don't want to deal with those things. I think these guys run on cash, and because I think they run on cash, I think their policies lean towards who's giving them the money for it. Do you think people are going to become aware? Like, I know for me, I think it was the second term. My assumption was, all right, Obama has to keep it under wraps for the first term because he thinks he may not necessarily get reelected. And I thought he's going to rip the chains off in the second year. It's like, oh man, he's going to rip his shirt off, and he's going to be, this kind of Herculean figure with all these muscles bulging in the sun. Not so much. Now, when Trump ran, I thought to myself, oh, he is Obama for Republicans. Like, that's essentially what we're dealing with. We're dealing with hope and change cut for a Republican audience. And if you notice, Trump was promising healthcare. He was promising higher minimum wage. Like, he literally ran to the left. And I thought to myself, A, this is bullshit. And B, possible, but probably not. Do you think Trump supporters at some point are going to hit their heads in the same way lefties hit their heads with Obama?
Oh, I think it's already...
And second part to that, by the way. If so, what will be the result of that? These are not the most cuddliest people on the planet.
I think it's already happening. I mean, I really think there's some buyer's remorse going on. And it's not even because of Trump himself. It's just because of the power structure that he's in. I don't think Trump really has much of an ideology. I think he's just sort of this loose cannon guy who's kind of megalomaniacal about it all. And it's just sort of a shady business oligarch. I mean, I think that's pretty much just all he is. And he's one of many shady oligarchs all around the world, And I think this is also just something that he wants in his biography, So, I mean, at one point he said, "Why don't we just give everyone Medicare?" It's not because he actually gave a shit. He just thought like, well, that would make it easy, right? And then we can name it after me. It might look good. I mean, We could convince him on single payer if we just named it after him and if the right person had his ear. Who's not going to go along with that? The establishment Republicans and Democrats that are sitting in the Congress and in the Senate. So, yeah, I think what's going to happen is you're going to have kind of like this new movement, kind of a little bit kind of like the Tea Party, where you're just going to have, but it's going to actually be grassroots. It's not going to be some Koch-funded front. It's going to be some actual, the people that were disenfranchised, that wanted to end the wars and invest the money back home, that saw all the years of, failed policies cripple them at home and just want a decent job and just want opportunities for their children. Those people that turned to Trump. And is that everyone that turned to Trump? No, there's some people that turned to Trump for a bunch of horrific reasons. But for those people, the total disenfranchised, I guess anti-establishment is the term people love to throw around. They're going to kind of wake up and they're going to realize, okay, this guy wasn't the guy. He sold us a bunch of BS. Yeah. Who is the person? Who is the real person? And then what I hope is that they really start listening to a Bernie Sanders and a Nina Turner and a Tulsi Gabbard. I really hope that they start kind of going over there and they realize, oh, these are the folks that are what I'm about.
I think they would have if that was on the menu. Like, I think it's one of those things, this kind of failure of the left is the rise of the right. Like, if there was something available to them on the left, I think they probably would have taken it. I think Sanders would have trounced Trump. And the reason I say that, when you were looking at the polls, there was like a 15-point difference between Trump and Sanders, with like a 1-point difference between Clinton and Trump. Like, it wasn't even close. People knew exactly what they wanted on this. They just didn't get it. Rob said, tell them what your no stance. So I have a no argument. My no argument is typically you vote for the person who represents your interests. And until you can say, I am not pulling the lever, I am not going in and putting the lever for somebody who's not representing my interests, nothing changes. Now, the reason I say that is if you have somebody like a Tulsi Gabbard gets my vote any day of the week. If it's somebody like a Joe Manchin is going to lose. Now, the reason I say that is if I'm giving my vote to Joe Manchin, why am I giving my vote to Joe Manchin? And how is Joe Manchin going to take me giving him his vote? It's like saying, hey, thank you for being complicit and voting for somebody who in no way represents your interests. I don't think it gets you anywhere. Rob, he wanted me to mention that. I don't know why Rob wanted me to mention that. Just kind of
well, hey, I mean, you're not going to get any dissent from me on that. I'm with you 100%. I mean, I won't vote for anybody that doesn't support single payer. I won't vote for anyone that takes corporate money. And I do have a little bit of an asterisk because, and that asterisk is unless there is an extreme exception. And the only reason I have that asterisk is because, when the whole thing was going on with Doug Jones in Alabama, I would say, exactly. So the asterisk is if it means avoiding having a pedophile sit in office, that might be where I make an exception. I say, yes, I'm going to vote to avoid having a pedophile sit in office. But, that's not really a reflection of me compromising on what I believe in. That's a reflection of our system is so broken that you may find yourself in that situation where you might have to abandon your principles because otherwise a pedophile is going to
get in office.
That's how despicable our system is. That's how despicable our system is. And why doesn't half the country vote? Gee, I wonder why. When you give them the option of nothing or a pedophile. Hey, Alabama, buck up. You have the options of nothing or a pedophile. Vote for this guy. He's not a pedophile. Oh, and the Democratic Party and the Democratic establishment is so inspiring. They are barely 2 percentage points more popular than that pedophile. That's how inspiring they are. How Doug Jones didn't see those results and immediately retire and then travel abroad and live the rest of his days in shame in a hut somewhere is beyond me. You are barely 2 points more popular than a pedophile. That's how uninspiring you are, and you offer nothing.
That's so embarrassing.
I would have voted for him. That's how messed up. I would have voted for him to prevent a pedophile. Yes, I would have. That's how messed up our system is.
And I saw all of these people pushing so hard for Doug Jones, like hard pushing. It's like, why do you have to push this hard when he's running against a pedophile? Like, that should tell you something. Like, it's like if you can't distinguish yourself significantly from a pedophile, oh man, your party is running into problems. You've hit an iceberg. You've hit a
just a
serious
little
iceberg.
bit. Just a little bit.
What do you think is going to happen in 2018? Because my no stance is based on this idea of if they win, nothing changes. Now, it's not because I want Republicans in office. I think these guys are maniacs. By the same token, I don't necessarily want to give my vote to somebody who's not representing my interests, because I don't think anything changes when you're just voting some random person in. The question becomes 2018. Do you think, hey, let me ask you this first. Do you think they're going to take over the House and the Senate in 2018? And if so, what happens to the Unity Commission if they do?
Well, I think that they're going to see some wins just on Trump fatigue alone. Yeah. It's tough because there's still some primaries going on. It's really tough to say exactly what's going to happen, come like the full-fledged midterms. So I would kind of have, let me put it this way. If they just stay the establishment course, I think that you're going to see some victories just based on Trump fatigue alone. Is it going to be a lot? Probably not. But you're going to pick up some seats here and there just because people are that fed up with Trump. And I think the balance of power is going to be a little less one-sided. Is it going to be a takeover? I don't know about that. Probably not. If we see some real grassroots progressive victories and we see some big upsets, and let's say somebody big gets picked off like a Nancy Pelosi or a Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and either of those two things are possible, and I'm certainly rooting for them, then I think we're going to see an interesting midterm, and probably the most important midterm of either of our lifetimes. And that's what I'm hoping for. And we'll have a clearer picture within the next few months. So, the pessimist in me is saying, we're not going to see much change. We're just going to see Trump fatigue, turn a few things. The optimist in me says the revolution is going to start, so I guess we'll see.
That's interesting. I for the longest time, I think lefties had this feeling of Sanders. Like, I think at the end of that primary, that 2016, I think people looked at it and said, 2020, Sanders is going to run in 2020. Now, everything that's taken place, meaning Sanders essentially aligning himself with Democrats for this stuff, him throwing lefties under the bus, taking on the Russiagate nonsense, all of those things might have put a dent in him. Do you think he's running in 2020? And do you think, look, personally, I think 2020 is going to be different, meaning you're not just going to have Sanders and Clinton. You're going to have like 5 other Democrats who are going to be on that list who are running for that office.
Well, I really hope Clinton's not on that list. I think that if she runs again, I don't think she is, but if she does, she is the most selfish person on the planet. I mean, that's just ridiculous if she were to run again. But
it's her turn, man. It's her turn.
Oh, geez. I think that, first of all, if he doesn't plan on running in 2020, I don't know why he's doing the stuff he's doing.
Yeah, he's behaving weirdly if he's not. So I think
and a lot of that, yeah. I mean, a lot of the Russiagate stuff, that was from his, that wasn't his direct account. It was like the staff account, which I know, like is run in partial by the Democratic establishment. So was I disappointed about that? Yeah, certainly. Was I disappointed about some of the stuff he's been saying on MSNBC? Absolutely. Now, some people were like, well, I'm done with him. I don't think that's a warranted response. I'm not either because, I think he's playing the game to avoid smears down the road. And I think he's also playing the game to try to get some of those people in the center that aren't quite there yet. I mean, pretty much anyone running for office, they peddle the Russiagate thing to some extent. And I think it's because, they feel like they have to get elected. Now, whether that's the case or not, I don't know. I'd like to think it's not, but maybe it is. And I like to say, now, granted, I'm gonna throw a disclaimer in here.
Go for it.
Bernie has pissed me off before. He'll piss me off again. I'm not looking for somebody that is gonna satisfy me 100% of the time. Nor am I looking to be a cheerleader for anybody. I will call out anyone's bullshit when it happens, but I will also be rational in dissecting a situation. Bernie said some stuff about Russiagate that I wasn't really a big fan of. That was pretty disappointing. However, when it came voting time, he was one of the few voices that went against those sanctions because of his concerns about Iran. So I would rather have somebody that kind of just says a few things to appease some critics and avoid some smears. But then when it comes time to cast a vote and use their actual power, they do the right thing and they stick to their guns and they don't let anyone sway them. I'd rather have that than somebody who maybe says nice things that I want to hear all the time and then, screws you over when it comes policy time.
Yeah, put a knife in you.
Yeah.
Do you think change can come through the system itself? Like, to play devil's advocate for the moment, I hear you with the Sanders thing, and I think I'm closer to you on this than some of my subscribers. I think they think I give him too much leeway on this. I give him leeway on some of the stuff because I feel like, we have a certain sandbox that I think we're in, but the rest of the public is not in that same sandbox. They don't see it that way. It's, can you push back against the tide? I guess you can. Would that hurt you later on when those guys try to put a knife in you, talking about the guys, working for Vladimir Putin and all this other stuff? If you don't push back against it now, I don't like it because I felt like it threw his supporters under the bus. Like it's, I don't want this thing where Clinton is clinging to this idea. Her supporters are clinging to the idea that the only reason she lost was because Bernie Sanders was being helped by Russia or Donald Trump was being helped by Russia. And I don't want Sanders feeding into this idea, because he even said something like, it's a shame that Hillary Clinton had to run against Russia and Donald Trump. It's like, what? What? So,
yeah, and don't get me wrong, I'm with you. And a lot of the things that he's been saying, I have been disappointed about. However, I'm going to base it on actions. I'm going to put it into perspective, base it on actions. I also don't envy the position the guy's in, the position of kind of having to kowtow to the DNC after they screwed him.
They cheated you after that.
They cheated him. So, Bernie's not perfect. I don't agree with Bernie on everything. I think some of the people advising him, he should reconsider. But I think overall, he's still the most viable politician in the country. And he stands for the policies that I support, like Medicare for all, like tuition-free college, like living wages, like no fracking. So yeah, I'm certainly not going to abandon him for that. I'm gonna be disappointed, and I'm sure he'll disappoint me again. But again, that kind of,
he's a person. Of course, it's going to happen.
Well, he's a person, and sending out a couple tweets to me, that speaks not as loud as how you vote. He stood by those sanctions, even though he knew it would hurt him politically, and it did. But that's what he believed in, so he didn't compromise on it. So you know what? If Bernie wants to tweet a few things to try to get some Clinton people on his side so he can win in 2020, but when it comes time to really stand in your guns policy-wise, he's going to do it, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. I'm not saying he's perfect for it. I'm not saying it doesn't hurt when he says that stuff and it's not frustrating. Of course it is. But, my mom taught me actions speak louder than words. And that's kind of where I'm at. And if Bernie's actions start going to the contrary, I'll point it out, then we have a different conversation. But thus far, that hasn't happened.
Do you think they're going to give him a fair contest in 2020? I mean, no. They've been pushing through that unity commission. And I said, look, the moment, if it looks like Democrats are going to win the House and the Senate, that unity commission is going to go away. And I remember one of the tweets came out, I think it was either Zogby or Kantz, Nomika. She was like, she says, yeah, they stopped calling it Reform Commission, just Unity Commission. It's like, there you are. I told you. Yep. It's like, I knew it.
So to answer your question, no, absolutely not. You know what? You want to talk about being disappointed by Bernie? Bernie could tweet about Russiagate every day until he's blue in the face, even though it is the staff account that's tweeting it. But nonetheless, his staff account or him could tweet about Russiagate every day till they're blue in the face. And I promise you, I will not be as disappointed as I was in September when I was in Washington, D.C. with a bunch of other lefties, and we showed up to his office to deliver him the petitions for him to start a new party, and he wasn't there.
You were there. Oh,
I was there. I was there in his office. Yeah, I was there in his office. I was a couple feet away from Jimmy Dore and Nick Brana. I was right there. I was on Tim Black's shoulder. No, I'm not. Tim's way taller than me. I wasn't on his shoulders, but he is.
The sad part is you had me for a moment. I was like, what? I mean, no, I was at the Convergence Festival.
No, everything I said is true, with exception to me being on Tim Black's shoulders. That's the only thing that didn't actually happen. Okay. I could have asked, but he was busy. But but I was there. Yes, I was right in the office. I was a couple feet away from Jimmy, a couple feet away from Nick. I was right there, absolutely. And yeah, it was a really big bummer that Bernie wasn't there to receive those petitions and that he didn't say, yes, let's do this. It's too late now, at least to have some short-term effects. It's too late now. But yeah, the Democratic establishment, it's set up to prevent the type of takeovers we're talking about. I mean, we talk about, well, we got to hijack the party. That's not impossible, but it's pretty much set up so that you can't do that. The road to do that is incredibly difficult, just like the road to a new party is incredibly difficult. But I think it's a clearer road than hijacking the party because they have so many things in place to prevent that from happening. Super delegates, just the way the gerrymandering works out, the electoral college, and not all that just pertains to Democrats alone, but they have all these power structures in place to prevent the type of progressive hijack that we're talking about. Even just the way the DCCC works, the way they favor incumbents, the way you have to use their consultants. They're basically a money-making pyramid scam. That's all they are. But they are a gatekeeper because it's the Democratic Party. We need to get rid of that gatekeeper. And the only way is through a viable third party. I just don't see it happening within the Democrats. Does that mean it's totally impossible? Not really, but man, is it a long road. It's basically like we're trying to break into this castle, and there is a big pit of molten lava, and all we have is like a paddle and like a boat where the wood's kind of shitty, and they're dumping molten lava from above in the castle gates. And then there's this other troll that's just sitting there flipping us off saying, you're never going to make it. Meanwhile, there's a lot of us that are trying to get in, and we're saying, hey, instead of getting burned alive, why don't we just build our own freaking castle? Building our castle is a lot of work. Yeah, but so is trying to get into this one. And it's a shitty castle anyway.
It's a burning boat, yeah.
So that's my metaphor. I know it's not a perfect metaphor. I'm sure people...
No, I love the metaphor. I don't think the troll is flipping you off. I think the troll is saying, like, hey, come on over. This is the best place on the planet. It's great. It's a welcoming area for you. I think they're trying to invite you over.
And then when my back is turned, they flip me off.
Right, then they flip, right.
Either
stupid asshole. He didn't know. Yeah.
Either way, they're wearing an I'm with her t-shirt. That's the one thing they're for sure doing.
The funny part about this, I made a bet with a guy that I used to work with, and we were looking over the election poster, and he was writing in his map. Like there was this thing online where you could put in the shade in the countries or the states that you thought the person was going to take. He shaded in 330 something votes for Hillary Clinton. I said, dude, that is never going to happen. I was like, I can't even see how she wins, let alone wins that much. He was supposed to wear a Bernie t-shirt if he lost this election. I was supposed to wear an I'm with her t-shirt. That asshole never wore the Bernie t-shirt. I left it in his office so he could see it every day so I can walk by shaming him for not wearing that t-shirt. It was like, asshole, how dare you?
Well, why don't you call him out? Tell him to wear the shirt.
I did tell him to wear the shirt. I mean, and I did call him for it.
What did he say?
He shook his head. He was like, yeah, man, I'll wear it. At which point he never wore it. I was like, that's sad.
Why don't you tell him, you know what, go into work and be like, hey, man, I know that you're trying to do a great impression of your candidate, but how about actually keeping a promise? Go in there and say that.
Oh, I like that.
You can have it.
Oh, I like that one. So, okay. I didn't know you were there with Brana. I was at the Convergence Festival with Brana. I had one of the panel discussions towards the end. Man.
Oh, really? I didn't know you were there. All right.
I was there.
I'm bummed out we didn't get to meet.
Yeah. Did you think that there was any chance? See, I didn't think Sanders was going to come. My thought was, I was like, there's no way Brana believes that Sanders is going to show up. He should have, at the very least, sent the representative, if nothing else.
That's what I was expecting. I was expecting a representative there where it's like, Bernie knows about this. It's on his mind.
Has his last name.
Give him some time to digest all this. And I was hoping for a definitive answer. And there has been, like I know his wife tweeted out some stuff about it, and I believe Levy did as well. But I was disappointed. Well, Levy actually said some not so favorable things about the movement, actually. But I was disappointed. I really thought that this is a man who has dedicated his life's work being an outsider, being an independent, and being an advocate for those types of changes and third-party changes. now he is in a position where he can really take it full throttle and kind of potentially revolutionize our contemporary political structure. And he's not doing it. Why isn't he doing it? I wish I knew, you know, I mean, I don't know. I'm hoping he's playing some type of three-dimensional chess that I don't understand. Or perhaps it's just he's planning on running in 2020. And he's like, look, I'm going to see the White House in 2020. And that's where I got to hand over the torch to someone else. That's what I'm going to do. That's where I, you know, as far as like a new viable party, that's got to be someone else. That's not going to be me. I'm going to give you my face, but then you guys need to groom who's next. I understand that perspective. If I was in my 70s, I don't even think I'd be as active as he is. So, you know, I understand that perspective, and maybe that's what he's going for. I don't know. But, you know, otherwise, I don't know why I didn't do it.
Yeah, it's a big lift. I mean, you're talking about starting a party from scratch. And like you said, if guys in the 70s. I guess my thought was, if you're trying to run again in 2020, and if you're trying to get this kind of unity commission and everything else going, it's possible that any feint or if you wink at one of the other parties and people see you wink at one of the other parties, he has such a high profile that immediately you give this idea that you're leaving this party. I mean, you're not necessarily affiliated or fully affiliated with the Democratic Party. You drain support away from the party. So I don't know if it's from a political standpoint. If you want to say that for the Russia stuff, he has to toe the line on Russia for political reasons, I would wager he has to toe the line on this for political reasons. I mean, can you imagine? And I would make the case, though, for political reasons, he should have did that. Could you imagine what the perspective of all of these Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, all of these other high-profile Democrats, if it gave any of the news came out that Sanders had either showed up to get that petition or Sanders sent somebody to get that petition, it would be massive.
Oh, I think it would have really, it really would have shaken things up. And the other thing that I think I myself am guilty of not considering as much as maybe we all should is the idea of green entering. You know, I mean, the Green Party, and the Green Party has some stigma over the years. It's definitely had its ups and downs, but you know, it could benefit from a facelift, and Bernie could have potentially been that facelift. I mean, Bernie could have said, you know what, I'm signing on with the Greens. Something like that really would have shaken things up, and then just kind of like putting all of our efforts into the party that already has the structure there. I mean, you know, there's something to be said for green entering. I'm not saying like that's definitely the way to go. But you know, that's another thing on the table. I mean, I'll say this much, man, when I was at Convergence, and I'm sure you had a similar experience, you see all these groups, you see SA, you see the DSA, you see the Green Party, you see environmentalists, you see Black Lives Matter, you see college students, you see comedians and activists and media makers, and you see nurses. And you see people that work in DC in the environmental sphere, and they know how they're ignored on a daily basis when they're the freaking scientists that know what we should and shouldn't be doing. You see all these groups, and you realize that we have a lot in common and very little not in common. And if we all came together and kind of formed some kind of front, we would be a voting bloc that any party would need to be in power, A, and B, we'd be a front to be reckoned with. And I think that we could be a viable third party or enter an existing party. So
I like Bronna's idea. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I like Bronna's idea too. And I like Nick a lot. I think he's spectacular. And I still think that that's a better approach than say Dem entering. I understand why people are trying all the above. And I think we still need to do that. I mean, we need to have some progressive primary opponents for these establishment candidates. However, man, at the end of the day, if we could have a one-track focus and make that our only focus, I think we could bring about some revolutionary change in this country.
Solidarity,
you know,
no.
Yeah, and it's sharp turns have made our political sphere the way it is. You know, I mean, we don't have the EPA because Republicans and Democrats compromised and came together. We have the EPA because environmentalists screamed so loud that they couldn't be ignored anymore. You know, we don't have gay marriage because all of a sudden Hillary Clinton decided it was okay in 2014. We have gay marriage because the LGBT community and their allies for years and years and years were demanding it, and we're demanding equality, and they pushed the status quo. It's movements that really bring about change in this country. It's not political parties. It's not bipartisanship. It's certainly not incrementalism. It's none of that nonsense. It's movement And it's recognizing a broken status quo and breaking it down. And we're at the point where that needs to happen again. How exactly it's going to take shape, I don't know exactly, but I know that kind of staying the course ain't going to cut it.
Yeah, I'm there with you on that one. I don't like this. Status quo is not going to do it. Like even if you just looked at take everything else off the table and dealing with just the environment by itself, we'll have years. Like I think the one of the articles I read last was talking about in the next decade or something, you get to the point of no return with regards to climate, like a drastic sudden change that needs to take place in order to avert disaster. Just on that, like by itself, you get into this idea of what 40% of the species on the planet has gone extinct over the last 40 years. I mean, it's you can go one stat after the next where you're knocking down the sperm count for men has dropped 40% within the countries in the West. It's plastic in our oceans. Like you can run down the list of things in the way that we're destroying our world. Incrementalism is not cutting it. Like the status quo thing that these guys are pushing. Part of my reasoning for this is if you hit a brick or if you hit a wall going at 60 miles an hour, if you hit it going at 90 miles an hour, you're still dead. Democrats to me are like, hey, we need to slow the car down to 60 miles an hour as opposed to actually just changing the direction of the car. I agree with you.
Yeah, I agree. That.
I'm curious, what were you doing before you started all of this? I mean, you started as a comedian, right? Or am I wrong on this? What were you doing before you started doing your
I'd like to
show?
think I hope I'm still a comedian.
Well, you still
I don't
are.
know.
You know what I mean?
I think I still have my card. I don't know. I mean, I was just on stage last weekend. I'm pretty sure I'm still a comedian.
Okay. In addition to being a comedian, what were you? How did you start this? Let's say it this way. How did you start getting into this particular field and this particular subject matter?
Well, I've always been, and like I've said this on the Jimmy Dore show, and I really like saying it. I'm not a news person with a comedy problem. I'm a comedy person with a news problem. I've always been a comedian. I always will be a comedian. At the end of the day, that's what I do. And the cool thing about that is you can kind of call out bullshit when you see it, and that's kind of the gig that you can have. I've always been really interested in politics, just as a human being. And prior to, getting involved with Jimmy and stuff like that, I was just a road comic. I was touring the country. And I was on the Young Turks Network kind of early on because I was doing this kind of short news segment for the David Pakman show that one of the folks over at TYT liked. They let me join the network and I would just do video, just kind of video monologue segments for my own YouTube channel. And then when I got here to LA, so because of that, I met a lot of people involved with the network, including Jimmy. And then when I got here to LA, I just started working with Jimmy more and more. And eventually it kind of morphed into the position that it is now. I also got into streaming via a different streaming company, which led to Get Your News On with Ron. And then I also have a podcast about music because I love music. I don't get to talk about it often, but I think that music and politics make fun bedfellows. So me and my buddy Adam have a podcast about music and politics called 5 Chords and the Truth. That's a little different than some of the other stuff because it's more music oriented, but it's, that's sort of like the other side of stuff that I do. And even that can kind of be responsible, can kind of be traced back to stuff that was happening with the Jimmy Dore show because, I'd meet a lot of our viewers and stuff at live shows. And some of them were like really into the same music as me. And they'd ask me about my record collection, where I like to go, what shows I'm going to coming up. So I realized I'm not the only punk rock and politics dork in the world. There's a lot of them. I should make a podcast about that to reach more of them. So that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
Very cool. Yeah, the news with Ron. I was looking at the channel itself. How did that start? I love this idea.
Yeah. So
explain to the audience what that is, where that is, and what it's about. Because it's an interesting idea the way you do this.
Yeah, and let's close on that because I got to get going here. But yeah, Get Your News On with Ron. It's my streaming show, and I started doing it on a streaming app called Live Me. And basically, I just had to develop this streaming show. And I got the idea of, well, what if I just had a show where people just tweet me what they want to talk about, and that's the show. So I started it not knowing how it would happen. And at first it was just 2 or 3 people just sending me articles and we'd talk about them for an hour. But now on a good day, I get to about half of what people send me. On a bad day, I get to less than a fifth. And when I say bad day, I don't mean bad like the show sucked. I mean like people are just sending so much stuff I can't get to it. I used to tweet an apology after every episode. I've stopped doing that because it just goes without saying now. Like it just goes without saying, which is amazing. It's such a cool problem to have. But I brought the show over to YouTube, and thanks to my buddy Joe, who kind of volunteered his time. I wouldn't let him volunteer. I insisted on paying him something, but he is grossly underpaid because I can't afford to give him more. But he does all the clips for the show. So he clips up the stream after the stream airs. So it allowed me to reinvigorate my own YouTube channel, because my personal YouTube channel had pretty much been on hiatus for 2 years because I was just busy contributing to other stuff and working on other things. But now this streaming show, which I made a schedule that works for me, I do it every Tuesday through Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We go for about an hour. Over on my Patreon, if people want to help support, that'll help me get the show to 2 hours. And that's Get Your News On with Ron. People tweet me articles or they post it in our Reddit. We have a Reddit subsection. And that's how we build the show. So I talk about exactly what people want to talk about. Most of my listeners are lefties and stuff like that. So we get a lot of articles from The Intercept, a lot of articles that I would be looking at on my own anyway. Like we have a lot of cross-pollination in our thought. But sometimes like people turn me on to feminist writers I haven't heard of yet. People will turn me on to different academics I'm not familiar with. People will send a movie review that they think is relevant for whatever reason. People will tell me a band to check out. Whatever. It's a fun show. We cover environmental news. We really do it all because there's different people that are concerned about different issues, and they share the articles that are really important to them. We have one guy who is a Native American. He shares a lot of Native American news, and usually he kind of spearheads that because he knows about those issues better than I do, right? Like I only know so much. He kind of walks me through a lot of it and teaches me. And that's part of the fun of the show. We discover things in real time together. So cool. We uncovered one of the school shootings. We were live what was going on. Somebody in the chat was like, breaking, there's a shooting. And we just in real time, I was hitting refresh on my computer. People were hitting refresh on theirs, tweeting any updates they found. Someone had a Facebook live video they found from someone that was in there. Mm-hmm. They were sharing that. And we were just experiencing it live together. And that can happen in the show. So it's a pretty cool thing that I enjoy doing. I'd prefer that there were no shootings, so we wouldn't have to. I'd rather we experience other things in real time, like maybe something positive. But nonetheless, the point is that you have a live time experience of the news in real time with a community of other people.
That's cool. I like it.
And for all the guests that come on, they need to have their bullshit meter set at -10 because you're gonna field a lot of questions. They're gonna be good questions. And if you try to bullshit, it's not just me that's going to be like, hang on, I smell some bullshit. It's going to be a community full of people in the chat that are also going to demand answers in real time. So it's not the easiest show to do as a guest if you're somebody that's going to be taking questions. But I kind of like it that way. And the people that have risen to the challenge, they've gotten more supporters because of it. So yeah, I like it. I think it's a fun concept. I think it's different. No one else is doing it, to my knowledge, and I have a lot of fun with it. And this is such a cliche, but it's really the truth. The community makes it great. If it wasn't for the people that tuned in every day, the show would suck. It wouldn't be Get Your News On with Ron. It would just be like, hey, Ron's looking for articles and he's lonely. That would be the name of the show, which doesn't sound like a very fun show at all. But it's Get Your News On with Ron because people make it that way. And I'm really thankful that they do. And I'm really glad that more people are connecting with it by the day. And that's really freaking cool. And
very cool, man.
Yeah.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you coming on. Ryan has to go, so I want to thank you for coming on, Ryan. I absolutely appreciate it. You're absolutely awesome. You guys
Thanks
do great
for having
work
me.
Have a good one. All right, guys, I'm going to end this here. If you guys enjoy the content, feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you guys can always support through either PayPal or Patreon. I'm going to thank Ron again for coming on. The guy is absolutely awesome. And that show is called Get Your News with Ron. And the other one is called 5 Chords and the Truth. And of course, there's always Jimmy Dore Show. All right, guys, you all have a good one. And thank you all for showing up. And I got my channel back, so fucking awesome. All right, guys. Let's see. How do I